OmegaMetroid.com is here. We're so proud to finally share our website with you, giving Metroid fans a dedicated one-stop shop for the latest news, fan creations, walkthroughs, maps, and of course, the latest episodes of the Omega Metroid podcast. That's not all. If you'd rather listen on YouTube, you can check out episodes there. And if you really want to take your Omega Metroid experience to the next level, consider supporting us on Patreon. You'll get access to special Discord roles, a platform on the website to promote your projects, exclusive bonus shows, and so much more. Memberships start as low as $1 a month. OmegaMetroid.com is the source of all this great content. So whether you're a new Metroid fan or a series veteran, OmegaMetroid.com is the place for you. Check out OmegaMetroid.com today.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Omega Metroid podcast from OmegaMetroid.com. My name is Andy Spiteri, joined by Gooey Fame. Goo, how are you? Is this virtual theater or what? What's going on?
Yeah, I'm so confused. I don't think I've ever been on this show, so I'm stoked.
I don't think you have either, yeah. You did show up for our live stream of Super Metroid. You were in the commentary booth with me, and that was
so fun.
That was a good night. But yeah, I don't think that we've ever been on the Omega Metroid podcast together, which is funny because we've been podcasting together for like 4 years.
I know. I was just thinking today, this is even better because on our feed on Virtual Theater, we have a podcast up about Castlevania Symphony of the Night, but you're not there.
No.
So we're crossing all kinds of wires right now.
This is like it's like one of those Avengers Endgame time situations. I don't even know what you'd call those, time loops.
Yeah, it's finally.
So we are here today to honor 25 years of one of the greatest games of all time, Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Before we get going, though, for anybody that doesn't know, so I have 3 podcasts, and one of them is obviously this one. The other one is the Zelda podcast. But the third one, and dare I say at times the greatest one in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah.
Is Virtual Theater, the podcast about video game movies and the stories that shape them. And we're on like year 3 and a bit of our podcast now, Goo?
Yeah. We were just talking before we went on. We're not like weekly, so I think we've probably only done like 60 something main episodes. But then we've got all the Patreon content that we've done too. Yeah, there's a lot. So we've covered ton of video game movies, including Super Mario Brothers, which is like an amazing movie. A classic.
We've done the entire Zelda cartoon, which was awesome. And we're currently in the midst of Captain N and the Game Master, which has a very Metroid-esque kind of slant to it, by the way. Mother Brain is like the main bad guy. And Simon Belmont is also one of the main characters. So all kinds of otherworldly crossover event going on there.
The first Metroidvania.
Yeah, it really is. So yeah, go and check that out. That's available wherever you get your podcasts. And yeah, it's good to finally get you on this show.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've only dipped my toes a little bit into the Metroid world, but I'm going to be doing more of it as time goes on, for sure.
Well, like we said, this episode is actually all about Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and we are going to this is basically just going to be an homage to that game, because I really don't have like a lot of negative things to say about it. In fact, I don't think I really have anything negative to say about Castlevania Symphony of the Night. It's like in very much the same way that Super Metroid is something that I consider like almost a perfect game. I think that Symphony of the Night is like right there with it as like a perfect video game.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's such a pure gaming experience. I don't have any nostalgia for it. I only played it last year for the first time, but there's certainly been a lot of games inspired by Super Metroid and Castlevania that have innovated other things and kind of, you know, made little improvements here and there. But I don't know, going back and playing this, to me, it's still awesome. It's still it's just pure is the best way I would describe it. I love this game. I think it's one of the best games ever made.
Yeah, I mean, and I think a lot of people would agree. Like, I think it's universally held as one of the greatest games ever made. You know, all of the scores back then were super high. All of the scores, I think, today are still incredibly super high. And I think even though it was like this was like a huge critical success when it came out, but I do think that in some ways this game is underrated in a sense, because it came out around the same time as like Final Fantasy VII and Mario 64, and like 3D was the new big thing back then. And like this was a game that was just like, no, I'm going to be the best version of a 2D game that I can possibly be. And I think that in and of itself is like kind of daring almost. But yeah, it's such a good game. It's regarded as a masterpiece, and yet I still think that it's somewhat underrated, to be honest.
I would totally agree, because I remember that era. I never had a PlayStation, and I think back though to all the games that my cousin had on PlayStation, and like games I would kind of covet that I really wanted to play. And it was Final Fantasy, Metal Gear Solid, you know, these games I saw, I'm like, whoa, you know, this is crazy. And it was partially because of that whole, like, the new trend of 3D gaming. And I just didn't even know this game existed. And I had Castlevania, you know, so I just didn't know about it when I was a kid. And it wasn't until, like, much later that I even knew this game existed. But of course, it was because of a ton of praise. So, you know, I went into it playing it as like, oh, there is a lot of hype from this, but I don't know. Yeah, it lived up to all my expectations too.
It's just and I don't know. Like, I really do think it's underrated, and I don't know if it's that way because like people, I think, associated Castlevania with like the traditional like 2D kind of side scroller that the first couple ones have been. If it maybe doesn't get its day because like Super Metroid came before it. I don't know, but we're definitely here to honor this game. Came out 25 years ago, almost to the day. So by the time you're listening to this, it'll be the 29th. It came out March 27th, 1997. That's wild.
Wow. Okay, so today, as of recording this, that's pretty cool.
That makes me feel like super old.
Yeah.
Like, that's like so long ago. That's wow. I remember playing Diddy Kong Racing back in 97 on my N64.
I was in the N64 camp at the time, for sure.
So, and I'm with you. I didn't have a PlayStation. I didn't get a PlayStation until the PS2 was my first one. Mm-hmm. And I want to say that I picked up the original PSX version of this game and I played it. But I also want to say that it was released in like kind of a collection on the PlayStation 2 as well. I could be wrong about that. But I know that like there was a bunch of Final Fantasy games that were like released in collection form. And I think that maybe Castlevania was too. But either way, I played it for the first time on the PS2. Obviously, this was a long time after I had played Super Metroid. And the similarities are, of course, quite obvious and quite apparent in the way that this game works. But one thing, and we'll kind of run through all the things about this game, but I think that like one thing that maybe we don't appreciate enough is like, you know, we talk about Metroidvania games all the time, and obviously Super Metroid laid out the groundwork in terms of maybe how the progression, how the maps, and like how a lot of the fundamentals work, but I don't know if we talk about the Vania part of the equation enough, because like Castlevania definitely takes inspiration from Super Metroid, but it also fuses it with like such a unique like RPG kind of twist where like Castlevania will reward you for like defeating enemies. You can level up, you can improve your stats. You have different equipment that improves your stats, different weapons, which is actually something that this game I think pioneered. This is one of the first games that you could just equip something other than the whip. In some ways, at least to me, in some ways, like getting the items in this game is a little bit more rewarding in that sense, because like in a Metroid game, like I'll use Super Metroid for example, like once you kind of have like 200 missiles, you don't really need 250. Like those last couple ones you're just getting just to complete the game, get like 100% the game. Whereas like in Castlevania, you constantly get like a better weapon or like a higher stat weapon or like a higher stat armor or something like that. And it makes kind of like incentivizing exploration a little bit more rewarding for me, because no matter what, you're getting something that is an upgrade to what you already have versus just like more of what you already have and don't really need.
I see. Yeah, I think there's like pros and cons, or like, you know, some things one type of game can do better in that sense. When I think of like how Super Metroid works, it makes me think more of like Zelda, where it's like it's sort of changing up your gameplay arsenal, you know, powering you up a little bit more. You're not having to think about stats as much, you know, and then in this it's more, like you said, an RPG. And yeah, I could see how like one or the other could be more appealing to someone for sure. I like both. I think there's positives to both.
Yeah, I like both as well. And in fact, I think that when I played Symphony of the Night, because other than Super Metroid and maybe Metroid Fusion, I think I might have played Metroid Fusion before I played Symphony of the Night, but like that was really kind of it for my Metroidvania experience. And when I played Symphony of the Night, I was like, this game is awesome, and like I fell in love with Metroidvanias, not just like Metroid games, but like that genre of game. And like now that genre is like one of my favorite types of games to play. Like, you know, you've got the obvious like the Oris and the Hollow Knights and stuff like that, but like even like the I just love that style of gameplay and like the progression and stuff like that, and like the whole world feeling like a puzzle. And I feel like I don't know if I would have necessarily found out my love for that if I had not have played Symphony of the Night.
Okay, that's what really pushed you for it?
I think so, because like I knew I really liked Metroid games, like that was apparent. But you know, like our co-host Dak, he likes Metroid games, but he doesn't really love Metroidvania games. Like which I feel like is fair, but like I really love Metroidvania games, and I love the like kind of different approach that Castlevania takes, because it's, like I said, it's kind of like Metroid, but it's also like it's almost like you have like the RPG elements and stat elements, which I do really like.
For me, it was what scratched the itch was that I came from it just loving The Legend of Zelda, and you know, I love kind of exploring and unraveling the worlds and unlocking the dungeons, and all these games are like, what if that was the whole world? In fact, I think that was like one of their big inspirations for this game was A Link to the Past, and how you kind of, you know, once you get this item, this part of the world opens up a little bit. And so yeah, it really, like, I'm surprised I didn't get into this style of game earlier, but I totally love it.
And I think that like Symphony of the Night took a lot of what really worked with Super Metroid and built upon that, especially in regards to like the map. Like I was like playing this game, like you can easily see like your item percentage completion on the map. You can easily switch between areas. You can easily see like there's different color tiles and stuff like that. So like a red spot is a save state and whatever. Like it took like a lot of like little small directions, but like really improved on some stuff that Super Metroid had had kind of laid out. So I feel like this game is like as much responsible for, you know, the Metroidvania genre being what it is today as Super Metroid is, which I guess is fair, because it's, if it was just Super Metroid, it would just be called the Metroid genre, but I think it definitely earns its Vania placement for sure.
Right. Yeah, it like iterates on things from that, you know, and I think one thing it does really well too is just like even though it isn't like this big 3D game, in like most elements of the game, they are taking like full advantage of like the new hardware that it's on. So it is cool because it doesn't feel like, oh, we're just gonna stick to this old thing. It feels like we're making something new. It's just that same style, you know. They're like,
Yeah.
they're pushing the limits on that style for sure.
One thing that I really love about Symphony of the Night, because I feel like it might have been a little bit jarring to play this game if you were a fan of like the OG Castlevanias. And actually,
yeah.
you are a fan of like the original Castlevania games, right?
Yeah, I think they're pretty fun. They're pretty tough, but
Yeah.
I like them.
So I always kind of wondered if like someone that really liked that, you know, the first style of Castlevania games, because I don't really like, I think they're okay, but I certainly like the Castlevania, like Metroidvania style better. But I love the way that this game kind of like bridges that a little bit at the beginning, where like you have the Richter fight and you're fighting Dracula, and it also kind of catches you up about where the plot is and like what's going on. But it was, I loved it. It was like kind of like I don't know, like a symbolic transition from like that style to like the new style.
Like literally
I just,
in
like,
the game, yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was so cool. I still think it's so cool. Like, I almost forget that you start off this game fighting Dracula as a Belmont, and like, I just think that's like so cool. I love it.
Yeah, I do love that. And that is an interesting thing to think about. I think in doing research about this game, I had found like forum posts and stuff like that. I think that's even like where the term Metroidvania comes from, is from the fans of the old games trying to like distinguish the style of Castlevania that is in more of this ilk compared to the, I think I saw classic Vanias. So you have your classic Vanias, and then your Metroidvanias, and then from there, people inspired by that made like, you know, the genre beyond that. But yeah, the thing I mainly saw was people saying like, well, Symphony of Night is so much easier. And I could see why, because it's less, like, honestly, going back and playing those old ones, they're really tough, especially because if you're stuck on something, there's not much you can do about it other than, like, hopefully get better. Whereas this, like, what's kind of nice is, like, oh, this boss is really tough. I can, you know, bang my head against it, and I certainly had. But there's a lot of times where you're like, I'll just go explore somewhere else and level up some more and come back with some items. And there's certain bosses I beat just by, like, throwing a bunch of items at it. And I'm like, all right, you're dead. Great. I didn't have to do much.
I think, like, the true challenge of this game, comparatively speaking, because I think you're right. Like, those... And that's kind of why I don't like the classic Vania. What a great name, classic Vania. Yeah. That's why I don't like them as much, is because they're just kind of more straightforward. Like, you either have to perform or, like, that's pretty much it. Like, you're stuck. Whereas with this one, like, I think that some of the bosses can be difficult, and there are some grueling areas, which we'll talk about later. But, like, you know, in true Super Metroid fashion, the true difficulty is finding out where to go and how to apply the skills that you have and where to apply them. And like, I really love that more so than, like, you know, fighting a monster that's impossible. Because, like, I feel like I've accomplished something or I've figured something out if I know to use, like, an ability here that can get me through, like, a gate or something by turning into mist or whatever. So yeah, I think that like, for me, I really love the fact that Castlevania embraced this new direction, because it really gave the series legs, I feel like.
Yeah, and it opens up different types of strategies, you know, like different weapons and different things you can try out. So I like really difficult bosses that I have to feel like I'm improving, but I do like the flexibility, you know what I mean? Where you can, okay, now I got this power, like, oh, this will help me out a lot more, you know?
Yeah, totally. I wanna stick with the gameplay here, but we'll go through. We'll talk about, like, the gameplay, the art style, the story, areas, all that good stuff. But one thing that I don't think that this gets talked about enough is, actually, let's start here. So first of all, I think that this game has, like, one of the ultimate great moments in video games, especially when you consider, like, it's 25 years old, but like, so you go to the end of the game, you beat the game, and you think you're done, and then you find out it's like, actually, I can equip this item and beat this dark thing that's hovering over Richter. And then when I thought that I'd completed the game is only literally halfway done, and it completely flips the map. It would be like getting to Mother Brain in Super Metroid, beating Mother Brain, and the entire Zebes map is flipped upside down, and you start at 0% again. I thought that this was like the most wild thing ever. Like when I played this game and found out that there was like this entire rest of the game waiting to be played. I don't know if that gets talked about enough.
It is pretty awesome. It's one thing I knew about going into the game, but I didn't know there was like a good ending versus bad ending, because when I first went to Richter, it was what I was just talking about, where he just totally stomped me right away, and I was like, I don't think I'm supposed to fight him yet. And then by the time I had powered up, I found like the glasses and the stuff, you get to unlock the upside down ending. But I still do think that's really cool. And another thing I love about it is it's just like the pacing of the game is really interesting, where it's like, you're picking away at the world like lock and key, like, okay, I can open up this area, this area. When you get to that flipped castle, what's cool about it is like it's now all accessible to you, and it's just like no holds bar, go wherever you want, like full open exploration. And it's just like it's just go find these 5 bosses and kill them, and like you can find other stuff there too, like other weapons and stuff. But I love that, where it's like, okay, you've mastered the game, you beat the game essentially, not really, but now you have to go in this weird upside down effed up castle and just fight a bunch of hard bosses. Like, that's really cool.
I love like that section of the game for everything that you just said, but like it's like it reminded me actually of playing Ocarina of Time for the first time in 1998. So I played that game like when it came out, and when I got like the 3 like jewels at the beginning of the game, went to the Temple of Time, I was like, all right, the game is over. This is a fantastic game. This is awesome. I'm gonna fight Ganondorf now. And then it was like, no, actually, like you're an adult and you got to do like all these other dungeons, and then you got to go fight Ganondorf. That was the same kind of vibe that I got when this castle flipped upside down. And then like, yeah, like the freedom, I love that it's just like, there comes a point in Metroid where like you acquire all of the power-ups, and you kind of are in like God mode, and like then you can go and sweep the board and get all the expansions and stuff like that, and like everything is open to you. And like that's like the latter half of the entire game in Symphony of the Night. It's so cool.
Mm-hmm. It's like it feels like you're playing it in like a New Game Plus type thing, except things are way different when it's upside down. There's different enemies and bosses, but it does feel like you're almost now like speed running this castle, because you have like all the flying abilities and stuff like that. So you're never like held back at all.
Which is actually like crazy too, by the way, because the level design totally works flipped upside down, which is like, that is so bonkers to think about, that they made a game this good and like this detailed that you can play it right side up or upside down, and it's still like an awesome platformer.
Yeah, there's some parts where it's like, oh, this makes a lot more sense upside down.
Yeah. But speaking of New Game Plus, something else I don't think gets talked about either enough is like, you can play as Richter in this game too, and I think you just have to set your save file name to Richter, and like, it's the same game, but like Richter plays so differently that it's almost like, in a lot of ways, it feels like a totally different game, which again is something I'm just like, this is like unreal. This game like keeps on giving and giving and giving. Like, you think you beat it once, and nope, you have to flip the castle. You think you beat it twice, like nope, now you can play as Richter. In the Sega Saturn version, you can play as Maria as well, which is also crazy. I've never played as Maria, but
really?
Maybe I should try.
I played as her in Rondo of Blood.
I played as her in Rondo, but I've never like done Symphony of the Night as Maria.
It is cool, and it exemplifies what you mean about like the handoff of the series, because I think they made a conscious choice. Like, if we make it Alucard like the main character, it opens up all these new types of abilities and magic, whereas like Richter is more of your classic Simon,
Yeah.
Trevor Belmont, dude with a whip stomping around. But now you
Yeah.
can like fly and float and do magic and all this stuff, and it's like that's really creative, and it just creates such a twist on like the world and the lore too. Like that's what I think about this game, is like almost everything serves the game well in like 10 different ways,
Totally. Yeah, let's keep with that, actually. Let's talk about the story. Which, by the way, if you're interested in hearing about Castlevania's story in depth, check out Virtual Theater. We covered all 4 seasons of that show, which was just an absolutely amazing, adaptation of Castlevania. And a lot of that show, if you've watched that Castlevania Netflix anime, basically the premise for the story is taken from Symphony of the Night. And I totally agree with what you just said. Where like by choosing to go with Alucard and not a Belmont, that kind of also felt a little bit symbolic to me of like, we're embracing a new direction, we're embracing a new like gimmick for this game. And I really like he's so versatile, which I really love in this game. But I think like I think that the story, I would say it's like a minimal story, but one that
100%.
works, I feel like, really, really well.
That's what's cool about the series, is like most games I've played, it's like kind of a different twist on like the same kind of story. Like Dracula's back, you got to go through his castle, but they kind of like make it unique in its own way. And I think this one really stands out because of like that sort of twist on it. And I love how simplistic it really is. You just have a couple moments where you run into Maria, you kind of get the flashback with his mother and stuff like that. They try to like humanize Dracula a bit. I had read that they were inspired by the Coppola movie, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and where he kind of had more of a sad, sympathetic backstory. And that really, even though it's very simplistic and people kind of make fun of the whole voice acting and stuff like that, I think it's really affecting. And I think a lot of the story is just exploring this weird, crazy Dracula castle. Like to me that's like what makes more of a good story anyway, is like just experiencing that world and everything.
I agree. This is an area where I feel like Symphony of the Night really looked at Super Metroid and was like, okay, Super Metroid also has a very minimalist story, but this world tells such like an engaging tale that like I feel like they definitely were like, okay, this works, we're going to do it in our way as well. Because like I feel like like you said, I think that the little interactions that you get here and there are really cool. I think it's actually really cool because of Alucard's position when you're talking to Death and he's trying to convince you to like like join me, buddy, like get on my team. So I really liked that as well. But yeah, just the environmental storytelling in here, I feel like is a very I feel like that's an important facet of any really great Metroidvania, and Symphony of the Night does it, better or as good as any other game out there with that. But yeah, I think like this is a less is more story. But by doing that, I feel like it really gave Castlevania legs. Like, because before Castlevania was all about the Belmonts and their quest to eradicate Dracula, and like Symphony of the Night was just like kind of a little twist on that, but it just had such great world building. I feel like with the character of Alucard and like father versus son, that's a compelling story, and you did have the Belmonts and classic elements there and stuff like that. So yeah, this game like really did a good job building that, and it kind of built to like one of my favorite Castlevania games that I would say I like almost as much as this game is like Aria of Sorrow, which was also not with a Belmont, and it also did something where like that character, because he's not a Belmont, can have like really unique like gameplay hooks that influence and inform the world around him.
Yeah, those are very cool. Like, yeah, they just find ways to like tweak the formula a little bit, but still have like that sort of little bit of element of all the previous games in there, which this game does still really well. Like, you've got just all these, enemies and locations. Like, there's parts where you're playing the game, and me as like someone who played the first few games when I was a kid on NES, like, oh, like I've been here before, like that's really cool. I fought this guy before. Just really, it's really clever in that way.
So I want to talk about the art style of this game, because this art style is like off the charts. It is so awesome. First, like just the illustrations, like the gothic depiction of Alucard, like his character art looks so awesome, and so does Dracula, so does Maria. Like the whole game, like the characters in this game, this art style is so good.
Yes, the concept art was done by Ayami Kojima. I still have my notes from when we covered it.
You came prepared. All right. Cool.
Yeah, she like defined the tone of the series going forward, right? Because one thing I love about the old ones is you do have it's very. I feel like it's a little bit more. It does have like cool gothic horror elements the whole time. It's pretty spooky, but it is like a little bit Halloween-y, you know what I mean? It's like you fight a Medusa, Frankenstein, stuff like that. And this has that. They bring back all that old stuff, but it goes even more so into this really like messed up, demonic, almost cosmic horror sometimes. And they pull in all these. I was like looking up all these different creatures and enemies in the game, and almost all of them are based on some type of like different cultural folklore. You know, there's like Celtic beasts, and there's stuff from different religions, which was something the anime did well too, is they had like incorporated different religious figures and stuff. And so it just like made the series even more like edgy in a very like in a very like late 90s way, you know.
I agree. I think that Kojima's stuff was like just like such. It helped elevate like the characters and the world and the atmosphere so much. I remember when they went with like a more generic anime looking style for like the Dawn of Sorrow games, and being so disappointed in that, like, because they just looked like hell, like compared to like the awesome artistic gothic versions that Kojima was drawing. I really even love like the red-haired Simon one that she did. I kind of dig that red-haired Simon.
Yeah, that's a really cool one. And that it translates also into the actual art in the game is so awesome. That it's another way that they totally took advantage, you know, of this new technology that they could do in the PlayStation, where you had people who'd been doing that classic sprite work that you get like in Super Metroid. You know, I think that's some of the best looking video game stuff to me. Is like that Super Nintendo 16-bit pixel art is like gorgeous, but then they're using all these new 3D elements mixed in. It's not like exclusively a 3D game, and it really helps certain things pop, like certain backgrounds or like certain enemies attacks and stuff like that, and it's like it really creates like this heightened sense of like, this is crazy. I don't know how to describe it. And even some of those like cutscenes with the castle too that are purely 3D are like, this is nuts. Like even to this day, it certainly looks like something that came out in 1997, but I still get like
I feel like it looks timeless, like just timeless is the word. That's where I was going next. My initial thought, like no, you're good. My initial thought, like when I fired this game up last week, I was like, God damn, Alucard's sprite looks so good.
Yes,
like, it's such a cool looking sprite. His cloak, the hair,
like animation so too, on like the movement of all the enemies, you know. And then
like the way his sword comes out,
and then just when a 3D book pops out of the wall, you know, it's like, oh, I love that.
There are like really awesome examples of what you're talking about, where like it's this classic, great looking sprite work game, like the timeless aesthetic, but then like you have like the giant skull that will pop out, and he looks like 3D, and he's got like this blue outline and blue hue around him, or like when you use some of like Richter's weapons and like you get the giant cross that's spinning in circles, like it really does. It's almost like a prototype version of like what we see now with like the 2D HD style that's becoming popular.
Yes, it feels
like it looks awesome.
It makes me like yearn for like, or like regretful that we didn't get more of that, because I feel like we then kind of like didn't get that type of game for a while, and then we jumped to like stuff more in the style of like New Super Mario Brothers, or like even Metroid Dread, where it's like it's just like 3D. You know, it like that type of stuff doesn't pop to me as much. Like you can make it look really good, but I feel like it sometimes doesn't look as inspired. And then like this new sort of 2D HD thing does look like, oh, this is kind of like a creative new direction for it. And I kind of wish we got some like more in the early 2000s, like what could have been done, like what could we have done with this technology to make 2D games.
I think for me, I see Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and every time I'm just like, we could have got Metroid on the N64, and it could have been 2D,
totally.
and it would have been awesome. Now, I don't think that Nintendo would have done a sprite Metroid for N64. I think it would have kind of been like, you would have had like the 3D model that shows up in like Smash Bros. Basically, and I don't think it would have looked maybe as crisp as Symphony of the Night. That's just my gut instinct telling me that they would have went for like the 3D approach. But man, like if they imagine what they could have done on the N64,
could have worked for sure.
It could have worked. But yeah, this game like is just so absolutely gorgeous. There's so many different examples of like what you laid out, and just like really awesome looking sprite work in general. Like some of the areas in the background. Like we'll talk about the areas in a little bit here, but like I mean, like you go to the underground caverns, and it's like there's waterfalls, and like they're kind of appearing like it's like, again, they're almost like 3D, like they're appearing before Alucard. It just like it's so
they did a
so
lot
awesome
with like the layering, like 3D layering the sprites
Yeah,
themselves.
that's the word. Yeah,
so we're like you don't even really think about it at the time, or like if you're not really paying attention, you can't really tell that it is like 3D. It's like it's like master craftsmanship, I think. Like the height of this style of artwork in video games, I think.
It just, I mean, it looks timeless. That's the word I keep coming back to. So one important thing I feel like for any Metroidvania game is a sense of good pacing, and that's kind of something that we stole from Zelda Dungeon from you guys doing definitive ranking. But I feel like that's especially true of Metroidvania games, where like there's a really fine balance between like getting like not knowing where to go and being challenged by that, and then being frustrated by that. And to me, I feel like Symphony of the Night almost always is just like very challenging in that regard, where like I never felt like I'm stuck or like I'm frustrated because I don't know where to go, or like, you know, sometimes when you're playing like a Metroidvania game and you're just like, you open up your map and you're like, okay, well, I haven't went here, and like I stopped walking here. I feel like by and large, maybe with some exceptions, but Symphony of the Night is usually really good at like, okay, I just got this power up. I remember 2 or 3 spots where I can progress further. And like, for me, and maybe it's because I'm familiar with it, but I never felt like I had to like scroll my map and like be like, all right, I'm going to try this area up here and see if I can progress any further. I felt like this game was, again, like really good at kind of keeping you moving and keeping you going. And then, like we said earlier, when you get to the second half, it's just like, you know, it's like, see you later, pal. Go crazy.
Yeah, because the way it unfolds, like when it starts, you can run like the length of the castle from like west to east, essentially. And then there's a couple offshoots you can go. And so that does leave you with like, in a good way of like, okay, let's check my map. Where can I go back to? Because there's not like dead ends a lot. You know, you eventually hit a dead end. But it's pretty good, I think, just because of how the map is, where like parts will be cut off if you don't reach the top of a room. So like you get like, oh, I can double jump now. So like it's easy to see like, oh, I need to go here. You know, once you can fly, there's even more spots like, oh, I never got to the top of this room. So it's like you do get those items and you're like, ooh, here we go. You know, there's a couple ones where if you're not, this is something that like later games like Hollow Knight or Metroid Dread have, where you can like mark on the map. There's some certain ones where I sort of forgot, like the Spike Breaker, and a big one was like the Mist Gates. I kind of forgot where some of those were. And I was like, oh, I should have like wrote that down, you know, but I just like looked those up. But in like a modern game, there would maybe be like, oh, I can mark here like where the Mist Gate is. Because when you go up, it even gives you a little text like, oh, you can't come through here, you need like something. So that's the only thing, but it's not a big complaint. Otherwise it unfolds so well, you know, where it's like, oh, I got this, now this is open to me, you know. And then another part of it that's key is some things are just gated by like really tough areas or tough bosses where it's like you could go through them, it's just really hard to, but you don't ever have to, you know. You can always, sometimes you can go around, sometimes you can just go a totally different way. Like I was like ending up in areas on accident, like from the other side. I'm like, oh, okay, here we go.
I think like I distinctly remember, I don't know if it was Symphony of the Night, but I know that I've played like Castlevania games before, and like you get to like the Colosseum or something, and it's like, what the hell am I doing here? Like these enemies are insane. Like I do not belong here.
Just somewhere. I
love that.
Bam, 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 bam. Oh.
And like you walk in and like you just hear the music and it's threatening, and you see the first enemy and you're like, nope. Like I've done that more times than I could count to Castlevania, and like I love it. Like it's just like, I do not belong here, but do I dare press forward? I don't know.
Yeah, I had that feeling so many areas for sure.
Which is a uniquely Metroidvania experience, I feel like, because you know you can't get that in a lot of other different games. But yeah, I think that Symphony of the Night keeps you moving really well. I want to talk about some of the items and abilities here. And I know that we kind of mentioned it earlier, but I want to reiterate again, just like how much I love the fact that as much as I like a good whip, and I like using the whip,
and you can get whips in this, so that's cool.
Can get whips. Yeah, I mean, you can play the entire game with a whip if you want, but I love getting a sword and like all the different like weapons and stuff that you can get, and shields or whatever. To me, that really like put this game series over to the next level, was just having that like different ability to like, you know, have a little bit more versatile offense.
And I like that it's like you have like the whole right hand left hand thing. So
yeah,
like when I started, I like to always do like sword and shield, you know, but eventually I found like there's that sword, that like magical one that you can like throw out and it comes back to you. That was really cool in the anime, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And so eventually I got pretty powerful where I'm just like killing stuff. I don't really need to block. And so I'm throwing that one with one hand, and then while it's flying around, I'm stabbing with the other, and I'm just like blades everywhere. And I love
this
that.
This is awesome, yeah.
But I also
I'm an all offense guy. I never use shields.
Offense.
Offense.
There is like when it's early on, I get into like, you know, the dodging and, you know, being defensive. But then you do like, if you just explore enough in these games, you get kind of overpowered a little bit, which is fun. I did like the whip, because that was another one when I first started out. It was like the game felt a little hard, and I was like, I'm having a hard time. And then that whip gives you that extra range, and I start killing guys from a little bit further out, and I'm like, ooh, this feels so good. So it is good. Like I had different stages of the game, you know?
To your point, like I really love getting up close and like having those like rapid fire, like sword shots. And it's like super, super rapid fire. You can get a lot of damage in quickly, but you can't linger for too long. And that's what I mean when I'm just like, I feel like that put it over the top for me. Cause like there are so many new ways to fight now. Like you can have like the big two-handed broadswords or whatever like hit hard, but they take forever. You can have like the whip if you want. You can have the short, close combat kind of weapons and stuff like that. Actually, no, it's not in this game, but in Area of Sorrow, you could just get a gun. There's a gun in that game that you can find.
That is so tight. I love that.
I mean, that's good stuff right there. But yeah, like just the different ways that you can like combat enemies in this game. I thought that it was like such a welcome addition to me.
That's not even mentioning like the sub weapons, the spells, the items, the summons. Like there's a lot of different things.
Like, I really like I think by this point everybody was kind of used to like the holy water, the cross, the axe, and stuff like that.
Classic.
And like those are pretty cool. But like, dude, like you're summoning like Imp the Familiar. You've got this like wolf attack going on. Like
the little demon guy was awesome.
Oh, like the amount of offense that you have in this game is unreal.
The only part I knock in this, and it doesn't really matter much, was like I never got into the spells that were like Street Fighter combos, because that's just not like, my brain doesn't work that well. But the game
Right.
totally works where that's just another sort of option. Though I do think in like Aria and like just other games, Bloodstained, they have tried to like rethink magic in all these different games, because I clearly think that's maybe the weakest element of the game. But like I said, it's you can use it for some people. I'm sure it clicks perfectly, but not for me. But it, like, you have so many different options that it's like not even that big of a deal, you know?
Yeah. And I do agree. I think that like summoning some of these is a little bit hard because you do have to do those like those Street Fighter like I'm looking at one of these combos. It's like 60 button inputs or something like that. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And I do agree with you that I think that like the Sorrow series kind of built and arguably perfected that. But I think that some of them are like really cool and easy enough to kind of get going. Like the Wolf Charge is one that I always thought was really cool. Or like you can do like the like you could summon the sword to fight with you, which I always just like absolutely loved. And like, I mean, it's kind of, this is low hanging fruit, but like having the like the Dracula 3 fireball attack, even though I don't use it very much, I just love having that because it's like Alucard.
I that was cool, and I loved how like even some of those things like played into like certain secrets. Like if you had the demon familiar summoned in this one room, he'd find like a secret switch or whatever.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
pretty neat. That might have even been required and not well hinted at. I don't know though.
I feel like there are so many small little like knickknacks like that in this game, but also just in like in Castlevania in general. Like there are some very specific requirements if you're going to get 200 and whatever it is 0.6% completion on this map.
Oh yeah.
Which I kind of love.
Yeah.
I think it's harder to 100% this map than it is a Metroid map. I'll say that.
I love that, like, I don't know, I love a little bit of obscurity in video games.
Yeah.
Especially for extra stuff, you know, like, I love that element of, like, you'd have to talk to your friend or, like, go on game FAQs or whatever, or you know, not now it's so much more easier to, like, look it up, you know, if you're stuck in, you know, Metroid or whatever, you can go to omegametroid.com and look it up. But I do love that.
Yeah.
I love like obscuring aspects of the game, and it makes it feel so much more mysterious, you know, especially because it works so much for the setting of this castle, Dracula's castle, and how it has all these like types of settings and like secrets that wouldn't make sense in a normal castle, but it's this weird fantasy vampire video game castle, so you can get totally crazy with it, and it really helps build the world out, I think.
I love that you just plugged like unprovoked, nothing like that. You knew what to do. You know,
It's
you
rubbing
knew what
off,
needs to happen. Yeah. One thing that I always love is kind of speaking of the artwork as well, like we were talking about earlier. There's a piece of artwork that depicts like Alucard in like his bat, his wolf, and his mist form. I thought that those transformations were like so cool in the game, and like I don't know, like I guess like turning into a bat seems logical and whatever, but like I just like I don't know why I loved it so much, but I thought that turning into mist was like so cool, and like you could eventually get like the poison mist or whatever that can like suffocate people. I thought that the transformations were like very, very, very cool in this game.
It takes much more advantage of like that classic vampire lore, you know.
Yeah, maybe that's why. Yeah,
because it is like, I think it is in like Bram Stoker's Dracula. Like you also can turn into beasts and, you know, mist and stuff like that. And you know, the more classic, or not classic, but the more like standard cartoon or whatever interpretation is just like, yeah, they turn into like a little bat, you know. But instead it does have there's something like even more terrifying about this vampire that can like turn into different beasts and like forces of nature, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and maybe that's why I can never explain why I love turning into mist so much. I just thought it was so cool.
It is, yeah.
Maybe that's why. It's just like you are this force of nature, this gothic force of nature. All right,
Oh,
one
yeah.
last thing before we move on from items. I love the Alucard set of items in this game. They're just like this incredibly awful set of items that like completely is useless. Although I think you get some like special abilities, although I can't remember what they are.
I don't
if you equip
remember
them.
this one as well. I remember like items called that. Is it like just that it's like more ornate or something, but not like
It's just like a garbage set. Like your stats plummet, I want to say. I thought that it was so funny. This was the first. I'm sure this wasn't the first game, but it's the first game that I can remember where there was just like an intentionally awful set of items in this game that you could just collect if you wanted to.
That reminds me of it's different, but it like there's like the sunglasses. I think it is like the cool sunglasses, or like there's I think the boots that make you like conspicuously taller or something like that, and it makes your like sprite like just a little bit taller for some reason. Just like these little goofy things like that is like a nice little touch.
Okay, so I just did some research, and you get a luck bonus if you equipped the Alucard shield, mail, and sword. So there you go. But yeah, the
stats aren't very good.
No, it's a miserable weapon.
Oh.
It's terrible. But you do get the Alucard sword and mail and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean that's cool at least. Yeah, let's talk about some of the areas in this game, and there's almost too many to like really like do a deep dive on each one, because there's like in a typical Metroid game, there's probably like 5 or 6 or maybe a little bit more areas. In Castlevania Symphony of the Night, there's like, I don't know, at least a dozen, maybe like closer to 20 areas, and like
okay, yeah.
I feel like they're all really awesome in their own way, and this kind of bleeds into what I wanted to talk about next as well. So maybe we'll just talk about them together. But like, I feel like the music really, really helps the areas in this game, because it's like, it really gives a sense of like individual to each area, because like the music is so varied. Like some of them you have like this classic death metal rock track.
Yep.
Other ones you've got like this synthy vibe to it. It's kind of like a bop. And then other ones you've got like classic piano waltz that you'd expect to hear in like the 14th century ball or something like that.
You're
like,
so
the
right.
Music,
yeah.
The music is so all over the place and really helps the areas stand out that it's almost impossible to talk about them not together, I feel like.
100%. And I think it ties really well into just the style, like we mentioned too. Here's another tidbit. Composed by Michiru Yamane. Aha.
There you go.
Who drew inspiration from those concept drawings and stuff. And I think that with the art style creates such a distinct vibe for the whole game and for the specific areas. And I think what you said about the varied areas and varied styles, you hit the nail on the head. There's like, like the thrash metal, death metal vibe. But then there's like, then the more like, oh type thing. But then there's some areas you get into and it's straight up like a jazz fusion song. And it's like grooving, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like I'd go see like a jam session at like a local bar or something. and they all hit so hard and they all fit their areas so well.
Yeah. Like the amount, the versatility in this music is like off the charts. I was listening to the soundtrack at work the other day, and I was just like, I was just sitting there like in awe. I actually stopped working. I was just watching the areas kind of play out, and I was like, wow, this is like actually unbelievable. Like how all this music is in the same game.
The vibes are unmatched, I think. And it's also worth mentioning the end credits theme. I'm Like the Wind is like this total ballad.
Oh man,
so sick.
It is literally like the ballad that you'd expect to see at like the end of Titanic. It's kind of awesome.
That caps the game perfectly. When you load it up, it's got that like choral stuff, and it's like whoa. But yeah, then you'll just be in like, sometimes you're in like, I'm in this like crystal cave, and it's like boom, 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 like on the bass, you know, and the drums are just like
Oh,
jazzing it up all groovy, and you're like, damn, it's like funky down here. What's going on?
that's one of my favorite areas in this game. Actually, I briefly mentioned it earlier, but like the underground caverns, I just like it has such a groovy track to it, and it's like it's got those cool waterfalls going, and there's like some like that feeling of like being submerged and just like in the depths. I love the underground cavern. I also love, I forget the actual name of it, but like the library.
Oh,
I just
yeah,
like
yeah.
I love that area, and like all the tables that come to life and attack you, and like flying books and stuff like that. And you usually get the little ectoplasms that are flying around there, and like just the classic like medieval music that's playing, and like it's a throwback. It's almost like it's trying to be lame, the music. It's like it's so awesome. I love it. And of course, I feel like the clock tower is worth mentioning as well,
Clock
which
Tower's
is like
cool.
I feel like that's kind of like to make a Metroid analogy for all you guys out there. The clock tower is like the lower Norfair of Castlevania, where like it's this intense, like very very lethal area that has like it has like a million spikes everywhere, has enemies constantly flying at you that can turn you into stone.
Medusa heads suck.
Oh my god, they're the worst. That's why you gotta have the quick sword, man.
Yeah.
And even an overhead sword is pretty good for those. But yeah, I feel like the clock tower is, and not just in this game too, but like in most Castlevania games, is like a pretty
There's
standout
always
area.
the clock
but like,
tower, yeah.
yeah,
That's one thing that's just cool. It's like they do like sell you on like this is that same castle from the first one with new stuff. But like especially because one of my favorite areas is just the beginning area. And you have like the zombies coming up who look, you know, like exactly like the old ones. And that's that, like, the song that's playing there is just so classic. Like, I couldn't describe the genre as anything other than like video game rock, you know, where it's like the drums are pounding and then the keys are just like, da, 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 da. And I'm like, yeah, you're just going, it makes me remember just going from left to right, whipping all these zombies. And then all the way up until that staircase that leads up to Richter looks just like the original game. So like that they have it all. Like and like with all the enemies coming back and everything, it's like this feels like a culmination of the entire series up until that point, but also all these new things that are totally unexpected and totally amazing. And they do that in all departments of this game. Even with like the way they produce the music is like it couldn't be done on anything up until this point on anything other than the PlayStation, you know?
It's absolutely wild. Like I'm pulling up the areas and I almost feel like I'm doing them a disservice because like I'm not gonna talk about like any of them in particular in depth.
You could do a whole, you know, series on one area. Yeah.
Yeah, and like we have a segment like that on the Omega Metroid podcast called Mapping Metroid, where it's basically like you do dive into an individual area, and like there's like I said, there's like 20 areas in Symphony of the Night that could fill out an individual Mapping Metroid episode. Like I'm looking at places like, I mean, the view at the top of like Olrox's quarters is just like absolutely unreal. Like the garden is crazy. Like there are so many areas in this game that. Like I said, I feel like I'm doing them a disservice by not talking in depth about all of them. But like, and then you add in the fact that like there are these areas, and then you flip them upside down. It's even more impressive, actually.
True. That name you said is so funny. Like that's what I love too about the game is like such a video game thing in a great way. Where it's like, okay, I'm in like the clock tower. I'm in like the library. Now I'm in Orlox's quarters. Like I don't know what that is, but.
I'm going to the Marble Gallery now. Yeah. I love these names, man. The Marble Gallery, Deathwing's Lair, the Cursed Prison. like I said, the Colosseum, and like you said, like a lot of these are like the same areas in all the different Castlevania games. So like you instinctively know when you're just like, oh my god, I'm in the Colosseum. I shouldn't be here yet. Like this is where all the powerful enemies are. Because you've played other Castlevania games and stuff like that.
Especially awesome. When you hit the clock tower, because those areas are such a pain in the ass in the old ones. And when you're like, shoot, I'm in the clock tower again.
Yeah, I need something that is going to prevent me from getting turned into stone, or else I'm in trouble.
Freaking gears everywhere.
I love the gears, man. The clock tower is such a wicked stage. We should just break the rules one day and do mapping Metroid on the clock tower.
Yeah, it'd be awesome.
But yeah, the areas in this game are so awesome, and maybe they're not like as big and as in depth as some of the Super Metroid areas, but I feel like there's such an identity to each one that it's so impressive. I feel like, but yeah, maybe to put a bow, because we kind of talked about the music as well, so maybe we'll just put a bow on that. I think that like I tried to, again, I feel bad because I didn't jot down like a lot of favorites, but I was listening to the soundtrack and I was like, man, this like Heavenly Doorway theme, for example, is awesome. Or like anytime I hear like any kind of remix of Vampire Killer is just like awesome. Like that's like such a great tune in the series, and I really just to you know, put a bow on it, I feel like it can't be overstated how important that music is to like making these areas feel so distinct and unique.
Yeah, just really the music, like everything else, just feels like so many people on the top of their game. You know what I mean? Yeah, so good.
Okay. You mentioned it earlier, and I feel like I'm going to bring this up because I think that this is a fair critique. But this voice acting is bad. It's pretty bad.
Well, so I played, like, they redid it, I think, and I played it on PS4, and I think it had the new stuff. But I still I think I even prefer the crappy old one. I don't know. There's something, like I said, the story is very slight, you know, and I think it gets everything across it needs to. But I think there's something, just like we talked about, like there's an area called like Orlox's quarters, and like there's boots that make you a little bit taller. There's something that I find endearing about like when you, like, for example, when you fight that like harpy or whatever that makes you think of your vision of your mom after you defeat it. He's like, you will die in the shadow realm, and I'm like, what? Or like the nightmare realm or something. I'm like, what is that? Okay. Like, sounds good. Like, I don't know. I find it charming, personally, that they're able to tell such an affecting story with this very over-the-top... Like, it can only be in a video game, you know what I mean? And I love it.
All right, since you brought it up, I want to talk about some of the bosses and some of the enemies here. Again, there's, like, a ton of bosses in this game. Like, way more than your average Metroid game. And I think that most of them are pretty good, but, like... I feel like once you kind of hit, like, let's call it the last, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 bosses, those are like unreal. Like, those bosses are like some of the best in the series. I remember the first time that I saw Legion, I was just like, holy crap, like this is like this ginormous like ball made up of bodies and stuff like that.
Yes.
And actually, I remember when they did it on the Castlevania anime, I was like equally as blown away because it was so cool to see that like in a show. But like seeing Legion, I was just like, holy crap, like that.
It's truly
that is
like
absolutely unbelievable.
Horrifying too. Like,
yeah.
That's one thing that's cool is like it has, I think it literally has all the old bosses from like every single Castlevania game before it, because I remember like getting trophies for like beating them from certain games. But like, so it's like, okay, like I fought a Frankenstein, but then you get to this huge mass of bodies. There's something so like, there's like disturbing ass bosses you fight in this game, and that's the most standout one to me.
It's certainly one that stuck with me. I think you know, we were just talking about him, but like Orlox, I always remembered because he's this like he doesn't really look like much. He's like this small little dude, but then he turns into like this big green like gremlin or whatever he is. I thought that he was really cool, and I thought that, so this is my first Castlevania game, and to me, when you fight Death, that's the equivalent of like fighting Ridley in a Metroid game, because there is that build up, there is that animosity. You go through the clock tower typically to fight Death, and you get to that like big confrontation, and it's a hard fight almost every time. So like I this is the first time I ever fought Death, and I was like, this is awesome. Like, this is such a wicked boss fight. And I still like, I get amped up going to that clock tower and seeing that boss door and like going to fight Death.
there's certain rooms you hit too, and it just has such a like tense feeling, like, oh man, this is a boss room. And then I
like when you like you're adventuring and you're like, you could tell like there's a boss room coming up, you can just like smell it in the air. That is like, that's good stuff.
I love the one, it's like the wall does some weird stuff and then you fight like, Dark Alucard basically. That's such a sick one early on.
Actually, and then when you fight Trevor and Sypha and Grant too.
That's
like,
really
especially
cool.
Trevor and Sypha, that was cool.
That's what I mean. It's like they got everything in there from all the games. It feels like such a, even though it is like paving a new way forward, it's like such a celebration of the series.
Yeah. And like, I feel like the way like this game, just with the bosses in particular, just builds up to like such a crescendo at the end, where like you're fighting like all the best, biggest bosses, and like,
and there's
you got the Legion
ones too.
Oh yeah. It's like so the pacing is so like, again, really good, and it's the boss, like, again, I kind of feel bad that we're not doing like a deep dive into each boss, but
it's impossible.
Like, there's so many
areas, yeah. It does like such a crescendo even at the end where you fight Dracula, and then like it has that thing where like it's like in squares, the pixel background like 3D like breaks away into this crazy like visual background that's such a like nightmare, and it's so crazy and cosmic, I mean, that's something that I really like that this gets into, is like there's such an otherworldly feeling about it that's like kind of horrifying.
And that's not even to talk about just like the average enemies in this game, which are also like off the charts. Like there's so many, and they're like you said, they're all kind of like inspired by like folklore or legends or like something, right? Like I feel like most of the enemies have like some kind of basis in, somewhere. They weren't just created for Castlevania.
Yeah, like they really, I was like looking into, because some of them I just didn't even know, and it's like I look into it and it's like, oh, it's this thing I didn't even know about. Like they really did a lot of homework, I guess, with these.
It's really unbelievable, like the amount of, again, like versatility and the amount of masters that this game serves. It's unbelievable. So yeah, I mean, 25 years of Symphony of the Night. It doesn't feel like it's been that long, but I guess like maybe it doesn't feel like that because you can still pick up and play this game much like you can Super Metroid, and it's like I said at the top of the show, like fundamentally, I feel like it's like still a pretty perfect video game.
Yeah, it ropes in all these elements. It pushes things forward in a way and it's still timeless. It just does it all, and it's, to me, speaking as someone, like I said, who doesn't come with a ton of nostalgia for this game, I think it's probably in one of my like top 5 games of all time already. I love it.
Yeah, totally. So if you are a Metroid fan that's listened to this podcast for the last 2 years and you've never really ventured into the Vania side of Metroidvania, I cannot put over Symphony of the Night enough. It's such a great, fantastic game, like really the equal to Super Metroid in a lot of different ways.
Yeah,
and as important as that game as to the development of the Metroidvania genre.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a thing where, I don't know if this is the case, but I don't think it's a thing where people argue over which one's better, right? Like that shouldn't be the case.
I never really see that.
Okay. Yeah, it's clearly, you should check it out. There's clearly a thirst for this because people are making all these types of games. People, even so much so that, they want Koji Igarashi or whatever to like keep making this game over and over. There's just like, I can totally see why there's such a thirst for this game, because it just leaves you wanting more, which is incredible. Because like we said, you play the game, then you beat it, and then you flip the castle and you beat it again, and then you play as Richter, and you beat it again, and you play as Maria and you beat it again. Even just
It's crazy.
like the first time through is so massive and everything, but I still think it's only like a 10-12 hour game, you know.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
what
and
it's so
that's
good.
the thing too. It doesn't overstay its welcome either.
Yeah, you never feel like even though it does the thing of we are just reusing the whole map and you're going to play through it again. To me it does not ever feel like padded, you know what I mean? At least I think so.
No, I think that's fair. So yeah, if you haven't played Castlevania Symphony of the Night ever, go and play it. If you haven't played it in a long time, go and play it. This game is one of the greatest of all time, and I think that it's probably safe to say that without this game, and obviously without Super Metroid, that genre of video game that we love so much just like doesn't exist. So, you know, not only is this a game worthy of respect that way, but it's still like an absolute, like, it holds up. It absolutely holds up to play, and you won't be disappointed. So, yeah, there it is. 25 years of Symphony of the Night. Wow.
Well, I've only been hanging out for a few of them, for 2 of them, I guess, but you know, it's amazing.
I remember there was just an absolute Castlevania golden period from about the time that this game launched until, let's say, 2007, where like there was Castlevania Symphony of the Night, there was then Circle of the Moon, Harmony of Dissonance, Aria of Sorrow, Dawn of Sorrow, Portrait of Ruin, Order of Ecclesia. You had like the PlayStation 2 games, which are also pretty awesome.
I think that shows too, like how it kind of stinks a little bit. Like they were kind of relegated a little bit to GBA and DS because they, like on Nintendo 64, they had to do the thing. It's probably like demanded that it's like, no, you got to make a 3D game. So you get like Castlevania 64, which I don't really even know the quality of, but I guess I would be curious to check it out. But it feels like that's just not the right thing for the series, but I don't know. That's just a feeling I have.
I wish that they would go back to this, man, and like stop with that Lords of Darkness garbage that they've been pumping out for the last couple of years. But I don't know what the future of Castlevania is, because I feel like Konami doesn't really make video games anymore, so I'm not sure.
Do you think it's possible because it's like, okay, because there's clearly a market or like a thirst for it, because they had Igarashi was able to make the Bloodstained game, and also like on like there's just so many of these indie games, and then Metroid Dread also proved that like people want this classic experience. So do you think that could inspire them to make another just like classic Castlevania Metroidvania game?
I mean, I don't know. I really don't know what's going on with Konami, because there's a bunch of things that I feel like seem like some pretty obvious slam dunks that they could do, but they haven't done. Like, I think that you could remake the first Metal Gear and like Metal Gear 2. Not Solid, but like the NES games. I feel like that would be like a nice baby step to kind of get people back happy with them after the Kojima debacle.
True.
So I feel like everyone's wanted a new, like, what's that horror game called?
Silent Hill?
Silent Hill, yes, thank you. I feel like everyone's wanted a new one of those for like forever, and I don't know why they're not
well, that's
doing it.
I guess that is the sort of the answer to it, though, is like that these people who are responsible for it, like the minds behind it, they don't have. Doesn't mean it's not possible to make something good, but like, will it feel right? We don't know.
And an interesting factoid is Mercury Steam, who of course developed Metroid Dread and Samus Returns, also worked on Castlevania, Mirror of Fate, I believe it's called. So
okay,
yeah,
right on.
Some serendipity right there. But 25 years of Symphony of the Night. You owe it to yourself to play this game if you have not played it in a while or ever. It is available. Actually, the only place that's not available is on the Switch, which is kind of lame. Because I would love to play this game on the Switch.
It feels like it's just always been PlayStation exclusive. Like, I don't know how that's always been
I feel
a
like
thing.
it's got to be only a matter of time before it comes to the Switch. Like, the Advanced Collection is there, so hopefully this one isn't too far behind it.
True. Yeah, if you know what, if you have a PS4, get the collection with Rondo of Blood, because that rocks.
Yeah.
If you don't, if you just have a Switch, let's say, because it's, a lot of a lot of Nintendo fans are probably based on Switch. Get those collections on GBA and play Aria and first, and probably Harmony of Dissonance. Like, it'll at least get you it'll get you primed, because those games are trying to capture that same magic, and I think they succeed in a lot of ways.
I agree. Gooey Fame, thank you for coming on the Omega Metroid podcast today.
Thanks for having me. This is a blast.
It was a blast. And check us out over on Virtual Theater, the podcast, all about video game movies and the stories that shape them. There's a lot of good stuff over there. And like we mentioned too, there's Zelda series and there's Captain N series available on our Patreon. If you are interested, check out the Omega Metroid Patreon, because the first episode of ROM Hack Reviews dropped 2 days ago now, and I reviewed and played Super Duper Metroid, which was an experience, and it reminded me of playing Super Metroid for the first time in a lot of ways. Some good, some bad. So check that out over on Omega Metroid Patreon, and check out the website omegametroid.com, of course. And last of all, while I'm chilling here, check us out over on Twitter. I am at Spiteri316. Goo is at Gooey Fame, and we are at Omega Metroid Pod. That is it, everybody. We are going to get out of here, and we will see you all next week. Take care.